All right, welcome fabulous leaders. So good to have you here. This lesson is all about how to maintain good boundaries. Boundaries are essential to avoiding frantic survival mode and burnout mode. Boundaries are what happens when you create a personal bubble around yourself. And it's not just a physical bubble. I want to talk about a bubble that surrounds your mind, body, and soul. The body part is the easiest to think about because back in kindergarten, you were told, make sure you keep a personal bubble around you and don't enter the personal bubble of your friends. A body bubble is the one around your physical body. And yes, that is true even today as a leader. You want to maintain a physical boundary that is appropriate in size to the professional setting, even to the personal setting. What is the appropriate boundary for that? That's an easy one to think about. You can also think about a body boundary as your physical possessions, the things that you have, making sure that they are yours and that you also maintain boundaries around them so that you only loan out the things you want to loan out to the right people. You can also think, though, and extend that idea to your mind and to your soul. A mental boundary is a boundary around your ideas, time, attention, and energy. We've already talked a little bit about maintaining boundaries around your energy. That if you think about energy and you want to manage it, what you're doing really is you're trying to gauge it just like a fuel tank. Who do you give your energy to? Who is allowed to take something from that and who is not? So really maintaining and managing your energy includes managing the boundaries around who is allowed access to that energy tank and who is not. Same thing with your time, same thing with your ideas. Boundaries around who has access to your ideas, who doesn't. The final area for boundaries is soul. Soul means your emotional boundaries, the places where you can have vulnerability, where you can have intimacy, and where you feel like there should be a boundary around that. You can also think about your soul as your identity, the things that make you who you are, and creating a proper and appropriate boundary. Now, boundaries can be too small or too big or just right, just like Goldilocks. A too small boundary, the symptoms and signs of having a too small boundary are that you can't say no, that you overshare, that you are a bit codependent, allow people to disrespect you, that you have a need to belong and to please that is strong enough that sometimes you do so much for others that you're not doing anything for yourself. I find that for leaders in service spaces, places where we are do-gooders trying to serve others, that is very common to have too small boundaries, that our boundaries are too close into us, allowing people to have access to our time, our energy, our physical space, our physical things, to our emotions, to our vulnerability in ways that are too intimate, that are too close, and leave nothing left for you. It causes frantic survival mode and burnout because you're giving, and nothing remains for your own self. In contrast, when your boundaries are too big and too wide and take up too much space, that's a sign where you avoid intimacy, where you're not sharing, where you're a distant, detached, or prickly. That is a symptom of having too wide boundaries. And the source of frantic survival or burnout in those people is that there's no source of true connection and relationship, and you can't find help when you want it. So too small isn't good, too big isn't good. You want to seek that Goldilocks zone. Goldilocks boundaries where it's just right, where you don't overshare, but you don't undershare, where you're not prickly, but you're also not too intimate with everybody. It's a crucial skill for leadership. One of the things to do, how do you do that? How do you create good boundaries? You want to separate who you are from other people and who you are from other roles that you play. Think of it like, how do you maintain a good, strong sense of self and identity to know that everything that's within this space is yours and yours alone. And then everything outside belongs to other people in their personal bubbles, and that you don't invade theirs, just like they don't invade yours. Now, when I first was thinking about boundaries, I was like, but wait a minute, what about people who are really dependent on me? My team, my kids, my parents. Like, there are some people for whom I often give very, very freely of myself. And I feel like it's an owed thing, that I owe it to them. And that I should have somewhat porous boundaries. Like, my little baby needs to be inside of my circle. Well, I'd love to tell you and have you consider the possibility that maybe even a little baby who is completely dependent on other people in the world, even a little baby may have separate boundaries than you. So if I have boundaries, that doesn't mean that I can't give and I can't love on my little one, just like I can't give and love on my team. But it does mean that I consider my identity separate from theirs. And that's true of infants, that's true of your team, that's true of the roles that you play in this world. Like, my identity, my boundaries are not so wrapped up in my job, in the role that I play, that I can't dissociate myself from that. There was a really wonderful story that I recently heard about an exercise guru, one of those people who runs 100-mile marathons, who is exercising 4 hours a day, who really found exercise and physical training to be so much a part of who they are, that their identity really, really encompassed this idea of them as a really physical being. And then one day, they were in an accident and lost the use of their legs. What that person found is that they were still Fred inside. They were still their own human being, that they still were themselves, even without that identity. And that's the type of separation that one needs to have. I am not my baby. I am not my exercise. I am not the job that I play or the role. My kids go off to college. I'm still a mom, even if my babies aren't at home. So understanding that and being able to step into leadership, knowing who you are inside, stripped of all of your other roles, and to maintain that is a really essential skill. In order to set up good boundaries for yourself, you have to know who you are. You have to get centered as a leader. And we will be practicing some of that in our integration session next week. Remember, next week is integration. It's going to be on Thursday, March 3rd at 4 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be practicing some centering techniques so that you can get centered and know who you are as a leader. Now, when you're not practicing that, the other way to think about how do you know yourself as a leader is to really get clear on what it is you want and what is most important to you. What is it that you want and what's most important to you? We will be talking a lot about that in advanced training the next 4 months. It's partly so that by knowing what's most important to you, you accept that it may not be possible to do everything. And if you can do that, if you can let go of the idea that you have to do everything, you can set boundaries around what is most important and keep that protected within your bubble. Except that perhaps sometimes you won't be able to do it alone, that you have to connect, that if your boundaries are typically too big, that bring some people in, bring those boundaries in towards you and let other people come in and help you. If your boundaries are too small, there's 2 different mindsets that I know really help me set appropriate boundaries. The first one is the question that I always ask myself: if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Everything that comes before me, I really think clearly and carefully. If I say yes to this, I know that I'm going to have to say no to something else. My plate is already too full. So what is that I'm going to be saying no to? Oftentimes, it's the things that are important for me. It's the things that are most important to me. And to make very conscious, strategic decisions about that. For instance, This weekend, I am here with my family down in San Jose, and we are doing a gaming conference. Kind of geeky and really, really fun. But what that has meant is that I brought my work with me, and I'm making very clear, conscious choices about when is it that I am going to prioritize spending time with the kids and doing games with them, like this morning, spending time with my daughter and playing a game with her, versus right now, spending time with you and giving you the teaching that I have promised and that you need. So really use that if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to make really clear decisions about what is most important at any one time, and choosing that with care and discernment. So a second thing that you can do when your boundaries are a little too small, like it is for many do-gooders, I encourage you to pay yourself first. This is a tip from Oliver Burkeman, who wrote a book called 4,000 Weeks, talking about how is it to manage when you have too much to do and too little time to do it. He advocates for accepting that there is just no way to get it all done, that all of the requests for your time and energy are going to be too much, and that it's essential to set up some boundaries. When you set up those boundaries, pay yourself first. What that means is that when you're looking at how do I manage my energy, maintain your energy first before you start giving your energy away to others. Maintain your time, maintain your attention. That those are the things where you need to make sure that your tank is full before you start giving to others, because if you're trying to give from an empty tank, there's going to be nothing left. The last portion of this, we've talked about how to start off by setting boundaries by knowing what's most important to you and what you want. The second portion is to make those boundaries clear, both with yourself and with others. It's about operating on the basis of agreements instead of expectations. Lots of people have expectations of you. Make those and turn those into actual agreements. Negotiated, clear contracts. It doesn't have to be written, but really an agreement so that both parties are clear what is okay, what is not okay. It's the same thing with consent. How do you give consent to somebody that you have a romantic interest with? Take that same idea of advocating for consent to your work. So for instance, your boss comes to you and says, hey, can you do X, Y, or Z? In your head, you're already going, oh shoot, that's gonna add 40 hours to my next week on top of what I'm already going to do. Talk to your boss. Have a conversation so that there are no hidden expectations, and so that he understands or she understands that if you say yes to this, you're going to have to say no to some other things, and make it into an agreement that both parties can live with. When you think about that, the two pieces, knowing yourself and turning expectations into agreements, you put them together and you can start creating some really clear boundaries. You can create boundaries around your time and your energy, your body, as well as your emotions and your soul. How, though, do you create solid boundaries, even in situations where you feel like you're a bit out of control? That can be really challenging. Think about a situation where you're in a burnout culture, in a culture of an organization which is demanding so much from you, and even perhaps threatens you with the loss of your job or the loss of your role if you don't live up to some sort of very, very high expectation, which is taking too much of your time, energy, attention, your possessions, that you feel like you may not even have any autonomy or emotional stability to be able to manage that situation. Burnout often is due to workplace mismanagement, miscommunication, micromanagement, mismatch. A lot of it is due to too much on one's plate with too little time to do it. And that may not be under your control at all. The thought that I'd like to give to you, if that is at all the case for you, is that even in choices like that, you still have choice. You still have control over some things. And I'm going to take it to a far, far extreme. There's a gentleman, Viktor Frankl, who has written about his experience in the Nazi concentration camps. In his memoirs, he talks about this one thing, this one idea, that even when all other things are taken from you, your freedom, your physical body, all things. The last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances and to choose your own way. No matter what the circumstances are, you always have control over your mind and how you have an attitude and a mindset towards whatever is coming towards you. You can always have boundaries around that, even when you can't seem to find boundaries around other things. For this week's discussion, what I would love for you to do is, in the discussion session, do a little bit of self-assessment and accounting. Are your boundaries too big, too small, or just right? And what is the impact of that on you? I know for me, my boundaries are often a little too small. I accept too many things. I stack things up and I create a problem for myself because I don't budget in enough extra time in case something goes wrong. I accept all the little requests knowing that sometimes that's a problem and sometimes I'm going to get overloaded. The solution that I know I should do more of is to pay myself first. So that's the kind of assessment that I would encourage you to do and to write down in the discussion area. And the experiment for the week is to set some clear boundaries around your energy. We've been talking about energy this whole last 2 months. Set some boundaries around managing your energy. How can you manage your energy even a little bit better? What are the boundaries around who is able to access your energy tank? When are they able to access your energy tank? For example, in the mornings, I set aside some time for my own mornings and morning joy. That is a boundary that I really like to protect, that I love to have the first thing that I do when I wake up be a time to really top off my energy tank and keep that for me. So that's my way of paying myself first. That's my way of setting a boundary around my time. I also do that in the evenings. I set a boundary around taking my phone and my email off after around 6 p.m. That is a boundary that I like to set so that I know that my work things aren't going to intrude on my family time, which is super important to me. What kind of boundaries could you set for yourself? And if you want to do an extra credit, try an experiment and help your team at work create some boundaries around their work. Have an open discussion about how is it that they can create some boundaries that work for them and turn that into an agreement between you and them so that it's all open and all on the same page. Finally, this is the last 2 weeks of the survival skills portion. After this, you do need to jump over to the paid portion to get access to the advanced training. Advanced training is really going to be talking about a leader's mind, body, and soul. We're moving away from this burnout and overwhelm, and instead we're launching into how is it that you really find your center? So the soul of a leader. What is your identity? What are your core values? What is your core purpose? And how can you use those things and the knowledge of what those are by being centered in them to be able to do the hard things, having hard conversations with your team, taking care of the big challenges and the big wishes that are currently in your life, and navigating things like uncertainty and change. That's the soul portion. We're also going to be talking about mind. How can you create the mindsets that allow you to be your best self as a leader? And a lot of that is getting out of your own way. How do you quiet some of the inner monsters? How do you increase your self-worth and self-assessment? How can you make that something that you can move forward with as a leader? And the last part is your body. Now, your mind and body are really intimately connected, and that is a core tenet of neuroscience, is that your mind and body work together. So then how can you use your body in order to embody the kind of leader that you want? And we're going to do a lot of really, really fun and exciting types of exercises to allow you to find some inner confidence and to find your voice. So if you can, I would love to have you join me for advanced training. For the meantime, I wish you the absolute best, and I will see you next week at Integration Week. Bye-bye.